met Dale in 1961 at the Miller County Courthouse in Texarkana. And he gave driver's tests at one end of the hall, and I worked in the Miller County Welfare Department at the other end of the hall. And we met first in his office, but in a few days he came down to my office and asked if I would like to go to a movie. And I told him yes. And he said, well, would it be all right if we go to Hope and pick up my car before we go to the movie? He had to leave his car at the state police headquarters in Hope when he came to Texarkana. So I told him that would be fine. And so he picked me up and we went to Hope. And really, to tell you the truth, when I met him in his office, he was sort of a smart aleck, and I wasn't really impressed. But when we got to Hope and I saw that nice car he had, I was a little more impressed. And it was a 1960 Chevrolet Impala, black, two-door coupe. Oh, it was a pretty sharp car. And it had black and white interior, black and white checked interior, so it was really pretty. Well, by the time I drove that car back to Texarkana, I really liked Dale a lot better. So anyway, my first impression of him wasn't that good, but you know, it grew. And we went on to the movie, and he took me home, and he asked me could he see me again, and I told him yes. And he knew that I went to church, so he asked me if he could go to church with me on Sunday, and that sort of impressed me. And so I told him yes. And so from there, well, we just began to date and grew to love each other.
Well, I have many memories, but probably the first one that really stands out to me was the '68 tornado. And I was just it was a couple of months before my 5th birthday. But I can remember we lived in a trailer on Biddle Street, and I can just remember that there was rain coming in the closed windows and the wind was rocking the trailer from side to side. But I wasn't afraid because Mom and Dad were there, and even though I could sense it was a bad storm, I wasn't afraid because they were there and they were holding me. But it's kind of scary to be in a bad storm in a trailer. But that's some of my earliest memories of Dad. And then, of course, shortly after that, he got called to work. Traumatic time for our community. And he took us to the Suitors' house. It was our first night to meet them. So just a lot of firsts that night.
I think my earliest memories with Dad is watching sports. Dad has great taste in sports teams. He's a big Cardinal fan, big Cowboy fan. I think probably my earliest memory of him was watching a Cowboy playoff game. This was probably early 70s, so I was probably 5 or 6 years old. They were playing the San Francisco 49ers. And I didn't really know much about football, didn't have a team or anything, but it was just a great game we were watching together, and the Cowboys were down 12 points with 2 minutes left. They brought Roger Staubach in, and he marched down, scored a touchdown. Then they got an onside kick, then he marched down, scored another touchdown. Cowboys won. It was so exciting to watch it with Dad, and that's the first thing I can really remember. But like I said, I didn't really have a team, but that was the day I became a Cowboy fan, just like Dad.
My earliest memories of my dad, gosh, Dad has always been a great father. He's always been very active in our lives. He had to work a lot. Because he was the breadwinner of the family, and so he was not at home as much as Mom was. But I remember anytime he was at home, just the joy he brought to the home, and just the thought in the back of my mind, I need to please this guy. I remember he took me to see a movie in 1977, Star Wars, came out. He took me and Mike to see Star Wars, and it was awesome in the theater, the old Twin Cinema there in Jonesboro. I remember that. I remember Dad making me be a Cardinals fan. We were driving down the road, and we were listening to Jack Buck and Mike Shannon call a Cardinals game. It was the Cardinals versus the Los Angeles Dodgers. And I was a little boy. I guess I was probably, 4 years old, and I heard that name, Los Angeles Dodgers. Man, that sounds cool, Dodgers. And I remember saying, I'm going to be a Dodgers fan. That's going to be my team. I'm going to be a Los Angeles Dodgers fan. And Dad, I guess we were at a stoplight because I remember the car being stopped. And Dad turned around and he said, son, let me tell you something. You are a St. Louis Cardinals fan. You're not going to like the Dodgers. You're a Cardinals fan. And I could tell by the tone of his voice that he meant business. And so from that precise moment on, I have been a huge fan of the St. Louis Cardinals. Probably the sharpest memory I have of my dad when I was a little boy, I guess I was 8 years old, I suppose. And he came into the house one day and he asked me, how would you like to play baseball? And I was like, I'd love to play baseball. He said, well, I've signed you up for the baseball league. At the time, Dad was working as the fire marshal for the state police, and so he had regular hours. He wasn't having to work throughout the evening. He would get home at 5 o'clock every day. And so every day at 5 o'clock, I'd be waiting for him at the driveway. And we went out in the backyard of our rent house there on Westwood, and he had a sack full of baseballs, and he would throw those baseballs to me and taught me how to be a hitter, taught me how to hit baseballs. And at the beginning, I was horrible. We've got home video of me trying to throw a baseball, and it's just awful. But thanks to Dad's great coaching and his patience, I went from horrible to just bad. I wound up being just a bad baseball player, but that's thanks to his great coaching. But I can remember, just waiting in the driveway. Couldn't wait for him to get home, and I know he was tired, because he was an old man even when I was young. I know he had to have been really tired, but he never let on. He was always glad to go out and throw baseballs to me, and I bet you he's thrown tens of thousands of baseballs to me through the years, and that's something I'll always remember well.
My earliest memories of Dale probably has to do on National Road, always playing ball over at the house, over at you guys' house. We was over there every Sunday after church while they were playing cards. The night of the tornado, being over there forever. We stayed the night in the storm cellar. There's just so many memories. Going to Florida, that was an interesting trip. There's probably not enough time to go into that one. There's just so many things that I remember about Dale. And the main thing I remember about Dale, he wasn't just a friend to us. He was more like a daddy. Dale would whoop your butt when you got out of line, but he was just one of a kind in men.
All I have is good memories. I remember growing up in the Miller house, going over there, and Dale and Mary taking care of me, Mike and Carla and Craig, and it was just a great time, great family atmosphere, and I hope that, and I can say that it helped me to become the person I was by hanging around with Dale and his family.
I think the earliest memory of Dale was church league softball. He was always real friendly and welcoming, and it's one of my earliest memories of him. It was a very positive memory and a kind of good way to start off my relationship with him. Well, I kind of heard the stories of what it was like to date the daughter of a state trooper, kind of scary stories, but it turned out not to be anything like that. Dale was just a real good guy to be around, and I wasn't nervous at all about that. And I already knew him really well anyway from church and being on church staff. Of course, he was the treasurer, so it kind of got off to a different start because of all that. So it was a real positive memory.
So many of my earliest childhood memories are wrapped up in being able to spend time with both sets of my grandparents. When I was young, I spent a lot of time at Grandma and Grandpa Miller's. And one of the things that really struck me was I was always fascinated and impressed with Grandpa's police uniform. And I was very proud that my grandpa was a police officer. And he was so good to take time to spend with the kids. And one of the things that I got to do a lot was he would take me on rides in his patrol car. And he would always turn the lights on for me, and he would let me work the radar gun. And we'd come out on the highway, and I would really be working that radar gun. And one of the things that I was always hopeful of was the possibility of getting in on a high-speed chase. I just thought that would be incredible. So I would be working that radar gun, and if anybody was going 2 or 3 miles an hour over the speed limit, I'd say, "Grandpa, come on, we got to go get him. We got to arrest him." So I always had a lot of fun with that.
I guess my earliest ones are just some little things here and there. I remember he would always let me blow the whistle on his police uniform, and that was always exciting. And I remember when we lived in Rogers that we would meet them halfway at a Taco Bell, and he would always buy me some cinnamon twists there. And I think what I remember the most is just the anticipation of getting to see him and getting to see Grandma. Like, there wasn't anything better than going to see Grandma and Grandpa. And it makes even more sense now because seeing him with our kids and the way that he loves on them, absolutely we would be excited to see him because he loves us so much. So.
I'd have to say probably my earliest memories of him is just him taking me out on the four-wheeler all over their land, and I remember us getting back and I'd be like, no, I want to go more, so here we'd go again, and he'd just take me all around. So that's probably my earliest memory of him.
One of the first things I remember is me going over to your house, and your mom and dad were very welcoming, and someone called you on the phone, and you said I was over there eating all your groceries, and Dale made a joke at your expense, and I thought, I sort of like this guy, he's on my side.
The first thing I remember about Pawpaw is the time I went to T-Bar M and I got my middle finger stung by a bee. And he said, which finger did you get stung on? And I said, this one. And
So the first time I met Dale was on mine and Mike's third date. It was our nephew Paul's high school graduation, and I walked in, I barely got in the door, and I had never met anybody in Mike's family, so it was overwhelming. I was meeting the whole family all at once. And Dale just kind of looked over and said, well, she's prettier than the last one. So I didn't know if that meant he'd had a lot of girlfriends, if they were a lot prettier than me, but I decided just to laugh that one off. So that's kind of how he's been the whole time I've been married to Mike, just a jokester.
My earliest memories of my Pawpaw is him always taking me on four-wheeler and tractor rides.
I first met Dale back in 2007, so it's been a decade now that I've been privileged to know Dale Miller. Before we were family, Dale was my landlord. When I was in college, I moved out from the city of Jonesboro, from the campus of ASU, out to the middle of nowhere, and what it felt like to me. And it was beautiful out there, and I loved it out there. But I know that my mom and dad felt safe with me being out there all by myself with a state trooper living next door. In fact, every time my mom and dad would come visit me, my dad did not come to visit me, he came to visit Dale. And he would want to say, hey, before we go eat, is Dale home? And we would go next door, and my dad would end up talking to you for an hour before we could go eat. So that's how I met Dale.
Dale's known me and my family all my life probably, but the first time I remember meeting Dale or being around Dale was he was the fire marshal for the CID company, and I was a young dispatcher, and most of the time I worked nights after they got me trained and put me on nights, so I didn't see Dale a whole lot. Might have talked to him briefly or something coming through, but that's my first recollections of Dale. And Tom Cry was a post sergeant for the Highway Patrol, and Tom retired, and I'm not sure what year that was, but Dale took his spot, and then I saw Dale quite often. He would come in on night shift and sit around for a little while. And
earliest memories, I started in law enforcement in 1984 as a deputy sheriff here in Jonesboro, and I was arounding at accident scenes, coffee shop at the old one there at the mall, can't remember the name of it, Sambo's, and it turned to Larry's. So I remember drinking coffee with him, and back in those days it was Plug Eaton, Phil Carter, Roger Perry, Friday Joe, Stan McMillan. That was in '84. In '92 is when I switched to Highway Patrol with the State Police. Went to work for State Police in '88. '92, when I switched to the Highway Patrol, he was my first post sergeant. And I worked for him for about 2 years.
It was in the 70s, and of course I told you about the car, and so it developed a squeak in it. Of course, we drove that car for 13 years. So we were headed out to his parents' house one day, and he heard the rattle, and he said, I tell you what, said, I'm going to stop, and you get over and drive, and I'm going to run along beside the car and see if I can find out where that squeak's coming from. So I got behind the wheel, and he didn't tell me how fast to go, so I just started driving, and I heard him hollering, stop, stop. And so he came up beside the car and got in the car, and he was just panting. And he said, well, I didn't mean for you to just drive like get up to 30 miles an hour. And so, you know, it was the funniest thing. I never heard him mention that rattle again.
Well, I can remember when we lived on Sunwood Street. We were in the Viking Edition, and I was a small child, and we had a peeping Tom in the neighborhood. And we had a widow woman that lived next door to us. Her name was Virginia. And early one morning, she called Dad. He'd just been in from work for a little while, but she said that the peeping Tom, someone was at her window, and she was scared. So Dad jumped out of bed, got his gun, and grabbed what he thought was his pants and took off out the door to go and check on Virginia and see if he could catch the peeping Tom. Well, by the time he got there, the peeping Tom was gone, and he said he went to her front door and rang the doorbell, and that was when he looked down and realized he didn't have his pants. He had a shirt, so he had to kind of tie it around his waist. And I've often wondered if the peeping Tom saw Dad coming in his underwear, and maybe that kept him from going further into a life of crime, because that had to be quite a sight to see.
My favorite Dad story is when we were really young, Dad went on a trip as a chaperone to the Memphis Zoo. And he took Craig when he was preschooler. Anyway, he got on the bus. I guess he was thinking something else. Anyway, he introduced Craig as Mike. And so all day long, there's older kids that went. All day long, those kids called Craig Mike all day long. And at the end of the day, the kids were getting off the bus, you know, as they're going off there saying, bye, Mike, see you later, Mike. The last kid left, and Craig looked up at Dad and said, Dad, what's my name?
Got a lot of funny stories about Dad. I could talk for 2 hours of funny stories about my dad. But one in particular that I would like to tell, it happened, I guess I was maybe 5, 6 years old. I know we were living on Sunwood Street. We went out to visit my grandma and grandpa. They live north of town on Highway 351, 7 or 8 miles north of town. On the way back home, Dad let me sit in his lap and help him drive home. Now, these days, they would throw you under the jail for that, but back in the 70s, it was just kind of a common practice. Parents would put their kids on their lap and kind of let them help move the steering wheel. And on this particular night, I can remember seeing the headlights go bright and then dim, and bright and then dim. And I put it together pretty quick that whenever a car was coming toward us, we were meeting a car, Dad would turn the lights dim. Whenever they would pass by us, he put the lights bright. And I can remember asking him, Dad, how do you make the lights go bright? How do you make the lights go dim? And my dad told me, he said, oh, it's easy, Craig. You just blow on the dashboard. See, watch this. And so he hauled off and he blew on the dashboard. And sure enough, the lights went dim. And then he blew again, and they went bright. And I thought, that was the coolest thing. Of course, unbeknownst to me, that was back when cars had a little button on the floorboard that you pushed to make the lights go bright and dim. And I didn't know that, but Dad was he would blow on the dashboard, and then he would push on the little button down there and make the lights go bright and dim. And I thought that was cool. I was like, can I do that? And he said, sure, son, go ahead. So I just hauled off and just blew on the dashboard, and sure enough, the lights went bright. Like, awesome. And so the rest of the way home, he let me dim the lights by blowing on the dashboard. A car would come, and I would blow it dim. The car would go by, and he'd say, all right, make it bright. I'd blow the whole way. And he never smartened me up. you know, he never, when we got home, he never said, hey, you know, I'm just fooling around with you, son. That ain't how it happens. You know, there's this little button down here I'm pushing with my boot. He didn't say that. He just, you know, let me believe that that's how you did it. You know, everybody was driving around town blowing on the dashboard to make the lights dim and bright. So the next day I was at my friend Stephen Eaton's house, and his father, Plug Eaton, who was one of my dad's best friends, he was also a state policeman. I told Stephen and Plug, I said, hey, guess what? I know how to make the lights go bright and dim in a car. And Plug was like, oh, really? Yep. And I actually took Plug outside and had him turn his car on so I could show him how, you know, I was so proud of this newfound knowledge, how to make the lights go bright and dim by blowing on the dashboard. So Plug went out and opened up his state police car, and I sat down there in the driver's seat, and I took a big deep breath, and I blew on the dashboard like that, and nothing happened. So I tried again. I was like, and Plug said, Craig, what on earth are you doing, man? I said, well, it worked last night when I was riding home with Dad. Every time I blow on the dashboard, the lights would go bright and dim. And Plug died laughing. You know, he realized that Dad had pulled up my leg. And he said, son, he smartened me up. He said, you know, your dad was fooling you. So anyway, I remember that story. Dad got a big kick out of that little practical joke, making me look dumb. So thanks a lot, Dad.
I remember my dad telling a story. Said Dale and Dad were working, and if I'm not mistaken, they were working some DWIs down there on Airport Road on Christmas Eve night, and they found a package that somebody apparently had left on the hood of the car, on the top of the car, and they took it and they opened it up, and it was a shirt. Well, it didn't fit Dad, but apparently it fit Dale just perfect. So Dale took it home with him that night, and I think Dad wrote a letter up and put it over there and said, dear Mr. Miller, or dear Dale, I hope you enjoy the shirt. I'm glad it fits and everything. And there's a sweet, pretty lady named Mary who found that letter, and I think she had a lot to say to Mr. Dale Miller over that.
And this may be one of those times where you're telling off on each other. So Dale, I apologize for this, but I always found Dale to be scary. You know, so I don't know anything really funny that I can remember now so many years ago, but I always felt like I had to be on my best behavior when I was around Dale, and I wanted to be on my best behavior for Mary because I love the heck out of her, but Dale just kind of scared me. Brian Webb and I are walking into the gym, and it's a packed house. Gosnell's playing Riverside. The door flies open, and I see Jason Laster and Dale whipping the snot out of this old boy. Hit him just smooth, knocked him out the door like an old Western. They come flying out the door. I'm pretty sure I saw Dale banging his head against the police car in the parking lot, and I was like, I was afraid he was going to do that to me at some point, but I'm glad he was doing it to that man. But it has made the rounds, and you know, it's something that when Brian Webb and I still see each other, so remember the night that Dale Miller knocked the crap out of that guy? Him and Jason beat him up in the parking lot.
Well, we were having an overtime at the Nettletown Baptist Church, and a man came in, and you could tell he'd probably been in an altercation already. He had some blood on him and reeked of alcohol, and he came in and came up to me and two other ladies, and they left me with him, and said he told me he wanted something to eat, and I told him, come right over here, I'll be glad to get you something to eat. And I took him to Dale and Stan. And anyways, they assessed the situation quickly, and both of them under one arm picked him up, and his feet were running, but he wasn't going anywhere except for the direction they were carrying him. And so they got him out of there because there's a lot of students in there and parents, and you know, he didn't need to be in there. He was belligerent and just sort of out of his mind, and they got him outside, and he decided to spit on them and cuss at them. That was a big mistake. Stan held him, and Dale gave his six-pack a workout, and he told him he could not be cussing and spitting if he couldn't breathe. And I'm telling you, I gave that man a once-over, and I was shocked. I knew he was capable of something like that, but I'd never seen it firsthand. And when the police car got there, the man ran up to the police car and beat on the windows and begged them to let him in the police car. These old men are killing me.
The funniest one that I could think of was the dog on a rope story, but I probably shouldn't share that on camera.
obviously there are a lot of funny stories about Grandpa, but one that has always stood out to me happened one summer. I believe I was about 12 years old, and we lived down in Texas at the time. And I was able to come up and spend a few weeks with Grandma and Grandpa, which I thought was awesome. Now, one of the unique things about where they live is up on the hill. For whatever reason, nobody really knows why. It seems to be a popular spot for people to come and just drop off dogs that they don't want anymore. And it's always been a pretty good point of irritation for Grandma and Grandpa that randomly these dogs are just showing up at their house and begging for food. It's just not a pleasant ordeal. Well, during the time that I was there, a dog did show up, got dropped off, and it was hanging around their house. And Grandpa waited a couple of days because he thought, maybe this dog will mosey on, get the hint that we don't really want it around and go find somewhere else. But the dog did not. It hung around, probably partially because I was slipping it food every chance that I got because I love dogs and wanted it to hang around. So anyway, Grandpa waited, and it became obvious the dog wasn't going to leave. And so he decided it was time for the dog to go. Now, it is a well-documented fact that Grandpa graduated third in his class at Brooklyn High School. So his intelligence is unimpeachable. But on this particular day, he made a decision that was not the best. It was out of character for him. He decided he was going to load the dog up in his truck. He was driving the old green Ford Ranger at the time and haul it off and let it be somebody else's problem. Okay. So, but before he did, he got to thinking, maybe the dog going down the road would try to jump out of the bed of his truck and might hurt itself. So the solution that he came up with for this problem was he went and he got a length of rope and he tied one end of the rope into the bed of his truck and tied the other end of the rope around the dog's neck. Okay, so I know I was standing outside and watching, and I don't remember who else might have been out there. But he goes to pull off and to leave. The dog's in the bed of the truck. He's tied up. He doesn't make it 20 feet down the driveway before the dog does indeed decide to jump out of the truck. And unfortunately for the dog, the knot held. And so all of a sudden, the dog is just dangling from the end of this rope and not quite reaching the ground below him. And he's just making these terrible, awful noises and just flouncing around all over the place. Now, in all that chaos, I don't know who it was, but somebody had the wherewithal to go inside and get a knife. Meanwhile, outside, the dog is still flouncing around and just making the most terrible noises that you have ever heard. And not only that, but there is poop and pee just flying everywhere as this dog is in great distress. But somebody summoned up the courage to brave the poop and pee shower and went and cut the rope, and the dog was okay. The dog was fine, scared out of his mind. But it was okay. So we were all spooked by what had just happened. Grandpa took a little time to gather his composure, but I promise you that the next time he tried, there was no rope necessary because that dog was going anywhere that Grandpa would take him to get away from these crazy people who just tried to hang him from the back of the truck.
But probably the funniest thing that's just between me and him, when I was little, he had horrible manners. He was always talking about people who hadn't missed any meals and who were pleasantly plump, and his grammar, I didn't think that was good either, and his math skills, it was just all terrible. So I decided, I'm 5 years old, I'm going to start giving him lessons. So for probably a good solid year, anytime I was over there, I was doing math lessons, and it just wasn't clicking. He just wasn't getting it. So I finally gave up. I was like, well, he's just too old to learn anything new. Anyways, I guess it was a couple of years later. He was the treasurer at church, and he was on the phone with someone. They were trying to figure something out, and he was adding up all these numbers in his head, and I was like, how on earth is he doing that? And it finally hit me. Grandpa's not stupid like I thought he was. So that's probably one of the funniest things just between me and him. So.
One time, Colby, it was his first time fooling around with the water hose, and he'd looked at it for a while, and Pawpaw turned around, and Colby had finally got it on, and it sprayed Pawpaw.
Well, one time he was spraying hose. He was using his hose to spraying off the deck. And I saw him doing it, and he told me to hold it for a while. So, as a curious little boy, I was, playing around with it. And he happened, just because it's me, he had to happened to stand right in front of me. And I finally triggered to shoot, and it just soaks him.
And he went, "Dang it, Colby." And Colby, being little, he said, "I'm sorry, it was my first time." And Pawpaw was mad, but he wasn't going to be mean to Colby. He was still nice to him.
But he never got mad at me, thankfully. Well, Bob had this bonfire going, and I wanted to take on a tractor ride, He was like, "Oh, we can't go and went out to keep the fire." So eventually I finally convinced him we could, go on a tractor ride. So, we made a couple loops around the house, and then we came back on that third loop. All of a sudden, I thought that fire got a little bit bigger, so I told Pawpaw, and all of a sudden it shoots out into the field. It's just like a bonfire gone mad. And next thing we know, Meemaw's out there beating it down with the broom. Meemaw, we called the fire department, and Meemaw's still beating it out there while they were spraying it. She ruined her broom.
Funny story, a funny memory that I have of Dale has to do with my beagle Caleb, who moved out to Miller Hill with me back in '07. Caleb he's mischievous. He's an escape artist. And Dale and I worked tirelessly for hours trying to find a way to keep this beagle from getting out of his fenced area in the backyard. And so I can remember a day when Dale and I had been working on chicken wire around the bottom of his kennel, so he couldn't dig, and then we'd put a tarp over the top of this 6-foot fence so that he couldn't jump it. And Dale and I were walking away, and we heard the metal clanking. We turned and looked back, and Caleb was in the corner of the fence, scaling the 6-foot fence and squeezing between the tarp and dive barreling 6 feet down to the ground and taking off to go find some lady beagles of the neighborhood. I remember Dale looked at me like, what's she gonna do? He liked that Caleb ran free, and he liked to give Caleb biscuits and gravy. In fact, Caleb weighed 27 pounds when we moved out there, and when we took him to his first vet visit, since living out on Miller Hill, he weighed 37 pounds, and the vet was concerned that maybe he had diabetes or some kind of metabolic disorder, but no, he had just discovered Grandma's biscuits and gravy.
Well, him and Suter were always stirring up something, and it was always, trying to do a practical joke on someone, and whether it was Plug or Stan or any of the guys, or the secretary for them, they was always stirring something. I remember one time that after he became the post sergeant in Highway Patrol, Tom Cry and his son would come to the ASU football games, and they were leaving one of the ball games, and I think it was an afternoon game, I don't remember for sure, but Tom and his son, there was some young college males that were out of line, and Tom and his son corrected them, and it ended up in a scuffle out there. And so Dale come out to the office, and I remember him saying that he was going to call Tom and get old Tom on the phone and stir him up about these guys were going to, file charges against him. And I don't know, but Dale was ready to stir Tom up. And so he got Tom on the phone, and Tom, these boys they want to file charges. They're out there talking to Floyd now. They want to file some charges against him. And Tom, the only thing he could say is he wasn't concerned about anything except finding his pen. He got a pen in his shirt pocket, and he got his shirt tore off of him. That pen was laying out on the ground somewhere, and he wanted Dale to get back out to ASU and find that pen. He said, the boys gave that to me when I retired, and that meant more to Tom than anything. And so it kind of backfired on Dale, but he had to go look for a pen instead of getting Tom's goat.
It was just a few months before he's getting ready to retire. I think it was Roger Bullock had been in a car chase up around Brooklyn. And we was after some guys named Honeycutt from Brooklyn, two brothers. We figured out where they lived in a trailer at the edge of some gravel pits off Pine Log Road. And me and your dad ended up at this trailer, just me and him. Didn't look like anybody was home. Checked the front door, nobody around it. We walked around to the back door, seemed like there was a wooden deck. We walked up to it, knocked on the back door. He banged on it real loud. He turned and looked at me and he said, "Did you hear that?" I said, "What?" He said, "Somebody said, come in." He opened up the door and started in. I started in behind him and he said, "Whoa," he said, "I'm retiring in 2 months, you're not." And he went on in the house. I waited there and he come back out and he had a grin on his face and he said, "Must have been hearing stuff. Nobody home." So I always remember that. I've told a lot of young policemen that story over the years.
Well, I think the quality that I admire the most about Dale is his love for his friends and family. He's always just had lots of friends, and they mean so much to him, and he is just willing to help any way he can with them. And then he's loved his family. Of course, we had you 3 kids, and y'all were just the apple of his eye. And then the grandchildren came along, and the great-grandchildren, and they have just been the delight of his life. And so I think the quality I admire most is the love he has for his friends and family.
Well, there are a lot of things I admire about my dad. Of course, he was an Arkansas State Trooper, and I always knew how brave he was. And I really respected that. I was always proud of him for his service to the community and to the state. He always loved me and our family, and just his sense of humor. Our home, we didn't have a lot of money, but we had lots of love and we had lots of laughter, and he was just one to always try to look on the light side of life, and I always appreciated that about Dad.
I think my favorite thing about Dad is his devotion to family. I mean, Dad has always sacrificed and put his family first, which has really helped all of us out a lot. That's something I've always admired, and all of his kids and grandkids, he's constantly doing things for them or attending sporting events for grandkids, and I just have always admired that about Dad.
Dale Miller, my dad, is a great man, and he has a lot of great qualities in anybody in town. You mentioned, my dad is Dale Miller. Oh, he's a good man. They really have. He's a very well-respected man in town. Living with him, though, for the first 27 years of my life, I guess the 2 qualities that I admire the most about him, number one, his sense of humor. Hilarious guy. Very quick with a one-liner, very good at acting dumb. Dad is actually a very intelligent man, but he has got this act down where he acts like a dummy, and it's hilarious. But his sense of humor, a lot of practical jokes through the years, a lot of funny stories. Anytime Dad's in a room, there's laughter because he is a hilarious guy. Obviously, that has rubbed off on me a lot. A lot of my sense of humor is due to the influence of my dad. I greatly admire his sense of humor. I've been able to handle what tough times in life I've had because of my sense of humor given to me by my father. He taught us at an early age to laugh at yourself. He did that by laughing at us and pulling pranks on us. But he taught us at an early age not to take yourself too seriously, to laugh, to have fun. And I greatly respect that about him, his sense of humor. The other great quality that I admire is his faithfulness. He's a very faithful man, very loyal man, been loyal to his family his entire life. Great family man. Very loyal, very faithful to my mom, faithful to us kids. And even to this day, I promise you, if I was to have a flat tire out on the highway and had no access to a jack, I promise you the person I'd call is my dad. Hey, would you please come and help me? And he always willing to stop whatever he's doing and help. Very faithful man, loyal man. That means a lot to me. His sense of humor and his faithfulness, that's the 2 qualities I admire most.
I always looked up to Dale, not just because he was a good man or he's a state trooper. Dale was a Christian man first. He loved the Lord no matter what. Dale was a class act from start to finish, and that's what I respect about Dale. Dale's a sorry baseball coach, I can tell you that, but he is a class act in men.
That Arkansas State police team.
It had a lot of talent, just lacking in coaching.
Yeah.
I think he's a family man right off the bat. You know, I think about the interaction that I obviously seen with him and Craig and the things that he did, taking his time to coach our football teams or our baseball teams, being around, always being accessible to us and doing the things with us in the neighborhood, especially throwing batting practice and things like that. That, you know, time now that as my father, it's hard to come by, but it's a special trait that somebody gets out there and does that with their kids, especially when, you know, his kid wasn't very good and he was trying to do the things he could to help him become better. It was a chore for Dale to try to get that out of Craig, and we really do appreciate Mike and Carla because they overcame a lot from Craig. And again, being a father, and you look back at what our parents did, what your dad did, what Dale has done, the time that takes, it's a testament to really who you are. It shows that true character, and to help not only you and I to become better young men and young adults, and then into our adulthood. He helps countless kids that way that you don't understand until you get maybe in the business that we're in now when you're dealing with young people. So Dale, for that, I do appreciate everything you did for me and for the kids that you influenced and probably didn't even know you were doing it through baseball.
Well, the two that came to my mind were loyalty and commitment. I think Dale's, I've always been impressed with the fact that he sticks with, you know, whatever he's doing, you know, whether it's church, family, friends, work. He's very dedicated, very loyal, very committed to what he does. Does it right, does it good. He's always with you thick and thin. You know, life's full of ups and downs, and he's with you all the way. And even knows how to interject humor when times are kind of rough in a positive and you know, a way that, you know, is not inappropriate. I mean, it kind of lifts everybody up. And so those are some qualities that kind of stand out to me.
Well, there's so many things that I admire about Grandpa. He is a man of integrity and character, very courageous, and really a transformational figure in his family. You look at the legacy that he is leaving in his children and his grandchildren and his great-grandchildren, and it is really a testimony to the type of man that he is and the role that he has played in all of our lives. When Kelly and I adopted Josh a couple of years ago, we decided to name him Joshua Miller McKinney. And his middle name, Miller, is important to me because I wanted him to carry the name of my grandfather. I hope that as Josh grows up and as he comes to know his grandpa even more, that will be something that he is very proud of, to be able to carry that name and to know what it has represented in my life, and that it will come to represent something very special in his life, that he would strive to be a man of character, a man of courage, a man who is invested in the life of his family. And I pray that at the end of his life that he will have left a legacy just like his great-grandpa is leaving in the lives of the people that he is closest to.
It's hard to narrow it down to one thing, but he's set a great example for us of someone who is honest and hardworking, and those are qualities you don't find much anymore. And I know this has been said, but he loves his family. And I can think of so many times over the years where there have been great times and he's been there and Grandma has been there, and then bad times where things haven't been going right and they've been there for us. All you have to do is call, and they will drop whatever they're doing. And I know one specific time that stands out in my mind is the time that I ran out of gas on my way home in front of the fire station near Hilltop in 5 o'clock traffic. And the first people that were there were Grandma and Grandpa, and they helped me. And I'll never forget how helpless I felt until the moment I saw them pull up, and it made everything better. And he always adds humor to anything, so he made me feel not as bad about it. And And so just knowing that you've got someone that no matter what's going on, you can call and he'll be there, it's an amazing thing. Another thing that I admire about him so much is his selflessness. He and Grandma, without me asking, gave up 2 years of their lives basically to take care of Elizabeth while I went to work, and they will never know how much that meant to me to not have to worry about her when I returned to work, and that was something that they didn't have to do, but they wanted to do.
I'd say my favorite quality, and I know this has been said, but it is just so true, how much he loves his family. None of his grandkids can do anything wrong. He loves us more than anything, and that's something so great because not everybody has that. But I always knew as a kid that my grandparents loved me more than anything, and that's just something really great to have in your life.
You know, the thing that I most admire about Dale is his persistence. Ever since we've been married, Dale has been persistent about lots of things. Probably the most persistent that I've ever known anybody to be is he has been persistent to ask me constantly when we're going to have grandkids for him. He has never given up. I'm pretty sure that I will hit that time in my life where maybe child rearing is not possible, but I think he'll be like still asking. I'll be like Sarah, and he'll be asking me, when are you going to have a baby? So Dale, no grandkids, sorry.
He's always kind, always helpful. He would do anything he could to help you at any time, even if it's not convenient for him, but he would drop everything and come and help you. And he's always loyal and committed to family first.
He's always ready to crack a joke. He always has a joke about everything, and he has a great sense of humor. Whenever you do something embarrassing or anything, you always look and you'll see him laughing at you, and then it makes you laugh, and he's always really funny. He's also extremely nice, and he cares about me because he comes to all of my games. He's really supportive. I love Papa.
How strong he is and how positive he can be at times, and he's always funny too. So Papa always can crack a joke.
Dale has lots of admirable qualities. He is funny. He is kind. He is devilishly handsome. He cheats at every game he plays. He finds a way to win. And not only does he find a way to cheat and beat you, he rubs it in your face to the point to you just laugh with tears. But most of all, Dale loves his family. He's a family guy, and I have no doubt that if I ever needed him, that he would come running. And so that's some of the things that I admire a lot about Dale.
You know, guys like him kind of laid the way for us young guys back in those days. We always looked up to them, and he was always known as a family man, a religious man, honest, treated people right, treated people fair, and so young policemen looked up to people like him, and I was one of them. And when I went to work for him, I was probably the youngest one in the troop. Now I'm the oldest one. So.
My favorite quality about Dale is that he would take the apprehension down. If you did something or and you were scared as a dispatcher or a young trooper, and they were afraid, you know, I've messed up now. And I remember Dale would just, what's going on? And you would tell him what had happened, and he would just say, don't worry about it. And you know, that took a lot of pressure off of you, because you thought, okay, I'm in trouble, and I'm either going to lose days off. Back then, I think, was the main discipline. It never was rise to an area where you was going to lose your job, but it would definitely cause some embarrassment. And when I say embarrassment, it could be nothing, but they would always say you've embarrassed the whole state police. And so it was something you didn't want to do, and so you'd be really nervous about something that you did. And Dale would take that edge off, and I still use that today. And that's something I've taken from Dale, because you can see when you call someone or want to speak to them, and you can see it in their eyes. They're like, uh-oh. And so the first thing I tell them, you know, if most of the time, is that don't worry about it, you've not done anything wrong. And I got that from Dale. So, you know, Dale took care of his people is what I remember, and stood behind his people and worked with them. Dale got out, and, you know, even though he may not work late shifts, he was out there in the car and was involved. He wasn't hid out somewhere. And so the employees appreciate that. And so And anytime you called Dale back then, that was before cell phones. You had to call him at the house if he was home. He always answered. You could always get a hold of Dale on the radio or on the phone. So. And you'd call him because you think something was wrong, and Dale said, "Okay, don't worry about it." Dale was easygoing, and I've heard other troopers, some family even say that Dale was easygoing unless he had that red hair, and it was there for a reason. If you got Dale stirred up, he could get stirred up. But 90% of the time, or better, probably 99% of the time, Dale was always he was always calm and in control, and you never saw him where he was out of control. I've never saw him out of control, ever. But I know that he could take care of business when he needed to and wouldn't let somebody run over him for sure. But he was and that's something that's always needed in police work, is just a calm spirit, a calming effect, and Dale had it.
Happy birthday, Dad. I hope you have at least 80 more. I love you very much.
Happy birthday, Dad. Hope you have many more. Love you.
Happy birthday, Dad. Happy 80th birthday. I hope that your birthday is great. And as everybody else has said, hope you have many, many more. I've heard a couple of people say, hope you have 80 more. That would put you at 160. You're 80 right now, and you look like you're 60. So I guess if you are 160, you would look like you were 140. I don't know if I want to see you at 140. I think you probably would rather at that point be in heaven. But anyway, I know what they're saying. Do hope you have many, many more. Looking forward to many, many more years. Love you very much. I hope that you have a great birthday.
Dale, all joking aside, I want to wish you a happy 80th birthday. From the bottom of my heart, you're truly a great guy, and I hope you have a great, great birthday.
Happy birthday, Dale. Congratulations on 80 great years, and always remember that in the case of your children, 2 out of 3 is not bad.
Happy 80th, Dale. Really appreciate you, and hope you have a great birthday and many more for the future.
Happy birthday, Grandpa. We hope that it's awesome, and we love you very much and appreciate everything that you've done for us and all that you still do for us.
Happy birthday, Grandpa. Rob and I love you very much, and we hope you have many, many more.
Happy birthday, Dale. I love you very much. I'm so proud to be your daughter-in-law.
Happy birthday, Dale. I hope you have 80 more and no grandkids from Mike and Tanya. Sorry.
Dale, I appreciate everything that I've learned, the example that you've put out there for me to follow, and I want to wish you a happy 30th birthday.
Happy birthday, Sergeant Miller. Happy 80.
Happy birthday, Papa. I love you. Happy birthday, Papa. Hope you enjoy it.
Happy birthday, Grandpa. I love you. Happy birthday, Grandpa. I love you.
Happy 80th birthday, Dale. I'm so glad we spent so many together, and I just pray we have many more.